I am Emma Reporter, and you're watching CA Reporter. Tonight, we need to take a deep breath and separate fact from fiction, because if you've seen the headlines or the viral posts flying around social media, you've probably read something dramatic. Claims that Western provinces have officially broken away from Canada and declared statehood under the United States. That is a serious allegation. It hits at the heart of our identity, our sovereignty, and our future as Canadians. And let's be absolutely clear right from the start. As of February 2026, no Canadian province has legally separated from Canada, and none has been recognized as a U.S. state. There has been no official declaration, no ratified referendum, no constitutional amendment, and no recognition from Washington. If that had happened, we would be looking at the biggest constitutional crisis in our country's history. But here's why this story is gaining traction. Across Western Canada, especially in Alberta and parts of Saskatchewan, there is real frustration. We feel it. We hear it. We see it in town halls and provincial legislatures. Energy policy, carbon pricing on industry, equalization payments, and federal regulations have been lightning rods for years. And in 2026, tensions remain high. The consumer carbon tax was officially canceled in April 2025. That gave many of us relief at the pumps and on our home heating bills. But the industrial carbon tax continues, and it's scheduled to reach $110 per ton this year. For energy-producing provinces, that's not abstract policy. That affects investment, jobs, and long-term planning in places like Fort McMurray and across the prairies. At the same time, the Bank of Canada's policy interest rate sits at 2.25%. Inflation has eased to 2.3% in January and February 2026, according to official data. On paper, that looks like stabilization. But we know the lived experience is more complicated. In the GTA and the Lower Mainland, mortgage arrears have surged. Toronto's have quadrupled from post-pandemic lows. Families are stretched. Businesses are cautious. And regional resentment grows when people feel unheard. So when talk radio callers or online commentators start floating ideas about joining the U.S. or statehood, it taps into something emotional. Some argue Western provinces would benefit from closer integration with American energy markets. Others believe federal fiscal transfers are unfair. But emotional rhetoric is not the same as legal reality. Under our Constitution, a province cannot simply declare independence unilaterally and expect it to stand. The Supreme Court of Canada made that clear in the past. Any lawful separation would require a clear referendum result and complex negotiations involving the federal government and other provinces. And becoming a U.S. state, that would require approval from the U.S. Congress and compliance with American constitutional processes. We are talking about years, if not decades, of negotiations, legal battles, and economic uncertainty. Right now, what we are seeing is political pressure, not legal secession. Provincial leaders are pushing Ottawa on jurisdictional powers. Advocacy groups are organizing. Petitions are circulating. But Canada's borders remain unchanged. We need to stay grounded. Because when headlines scream that provinces have officially broken away, they are not reflecting verified government action. They are amplifying frustration. And frustration. Now let's talk about why this narrative is resonating with so many people across the prairies and parts of British Columbia. Because even though there is no official breakaway, there is a genuine sense among many Western Canadians that our voices are being drowned out in Ottawa. We have to acknowledge that Western alienation is not new. It has roots going back decades. National Energy Program memories in Alberta, pipeline disputes in British Columbia, and long-standing complaints about equalization formulas. What's different in 2026 is the economic backdrop. We are living through a period of adjustment. Interest rates, while down from their peak, are still sitting at 2.25% under the Bank of Canada. Inflation has cooled to 2.3%, which sounds stable. But groceries, insurance, and property taxes haven't magically rolled back to 2019 levels. When mortgage arrears in Toronto have quadrupled from post-pandemic lows, that tells us households across the country are under strain. And when families in Calgary or Regina see federal environmental policy tightening on industrial emissions, while the industrial carbon price climbs to $110 per ton this year, they feel targeted. Whether that perception is fully fair or not, it's real. Supporters of so-called statehood arguments often claim Western provinces would prosper more under U.S. economic policy. They point to lower corporate taxes in certain American states or fewer environmental restrictions in energy-producing regions like Texas. But we have to ask ourselves, what would we actually give up? We would be giving up our healthcare system as we know it. We would be stepping away from federal transfer programs that support seniors and families. We would be exposing ourselves to U.S. federal tax structures and political volatility. And perhaps most importantly, we would be dismantling a federation that, despite its flaws, still functions under the rule of law. There is also the matter of trade. Canada and the United States already have deep integration through trade agreements. Our energy exports flow south. American goods flow north. Western provinces already sell oil, gas, potash, grain, and lumber into U.S. markets. The idea that we need to become U.S. states to trade effectively does not align with current trade realities. And let's not ignore currency. We deal in Canadian dollars, our loonies. A transition to the U.S. dollar would not be seamless. Contracts, pensions, mortgages, and provincial debt would all face revaluation. Financial markets do not like uncertainty. Investors pull back when constitutional stability is questioned. That would affect jobs, housing prices, and small businesses in Edmonton, Saskatoon, and beyond. The louder this online narrative becomes, the more we need to rely on verified announcements and constitutional facts. There has been no federal proclamation. There has been no U.S. congressional vote. There has been no legally binding referendum in any Western province approving secession. What we are witnessing is political pressure being expressed in dramatic language. That language may attract clicks. It may fuel fundraising campaigns, but it does not change the constitutional framework of our country. And we, as taxpayers and residents, deserve clarity, not panic, my fellow Canadians, is not the same thing as independence. Let's also be honest with ourselves about what a real separation process would look like, because it would not be simple, quick, or clean. The Supreme Court of Canada has already clarified that a province cannot just walk away. There would need to be a clear referendum question, a clear majority result, and then negotiations with Ottawa and the other provinces. That means debates over borders, federal assets, military bases, pensions, debt obligations, Indigenous treaty rights, and trade access. Think about that for a second. Federal infrastructure in Alberta and Saskatchewan includes military installations, RCMP detachments, federal office buildings, and transportation corridors. Who would own them? Who would pay for them? What happens to Canada Pension Plan contributions paid by workers in Calgary or Regina for decades? Do retirees suddenly shift? And then there's Indigenous sovereignty. Many First Nations across Western Canada have treaty relationships directly with the Crown. Any attempt at separation would legally require consultation and negotiation with Indigenous governments. That alone could take years and involve complex constitutional court challenges. We cannot pretend those obligations disappear because of political frustration. Now, let's talk dollars and cents, because at the end of the day, we all feel policy in our wallets. With the Bank of Canada's rate at 2.25% and inflation at 2.3%, officials argue we are in a period of relative price stability. But that stability is fragile. If financial markets sense constitutional instability, borrowing costs can spike. Provincial bonds could face higher yields. That would make it more expensive for provinces to finance healthcare, education, and infrastructure. And while the consumer carbon tax ended in April 2025, easing some household pressure, the industrial carbon price climbing to $110 per ton this year is still shaping investment decisions in the energy sector. Companies factor that into expansion plans. Workers factor it into job security. Some political groups are channeling that anxiety into talk of alignment with U.S. states that have different regulatory environments. But alignment is not annexation. And economic integration is not statehood. We also need to consider public opinion data. While frustration is loud online, verified polling consistently shows that outright separation from Canada remains a minority position in Western provinces. People want reforms. They want stronger provincial autonomy. They want fairer fiscal arrangements. But that is not the same as wanting to dissolve Confederation. Social media amplifies extremes. A few viral videos can make it seem like an entire province is on the brink of departure. Yet legislatures are still sitting. Premiers are still negotiating with Ottawa. Federal transfers are still flowing. The constitutional order is intact. We owe it to ourselves not to confuse political theater with constitutional revolution. The stakes are too high. Our mortgages, our pensions, our kids' education, and our national identity are not props in an online drama. And when bold claims suggest that Western provinces have officially broken away, we need to demand one thing above all else: documented proof from official government sources. So far, none exists. So where does that leave us tonight? It leaves us in a country that is under pressure, yes, but still united under the same Constitution, the same flag, and the same legal framework that has governed us for generations. We are dealing with economic strain. Even with inflation easing to 2.3% and the Bank of Canada holding rates at 2.25%, families are still juggling higher mortgage payments than they were used to during the ultra-low rate years. In the GTA, mortgage arrears have quadrupled from post-pandemic lows. That's not abstract data. That's our neighbors, our coworkers, people in our own families feeling the squeeze. Out west, energy workers are watching industrial carbon pricing rise to $110 per ton this year and wondering what it means for long-term job security. When people feel financially cornered, political language gets sharper. Calls for autonomy get louder. And in that environment, dramatic claims, like provinces declaring U.S. statehood, spread fast. But as of February 2026, there has been no official act of secession, no recognition from Washington, no constitutional amendment passed in Ottawa. Canada's provincial borders remain exactly where they were yesterday. We have to separate dissatisfaction from dissolution. It is absolutely legitimate for provinces to challenge federal policy. It is legitimate for premiers to push back on taxation, environmental rules, or fiscal transfers. That's federalism. That's part of how our system was designed to function. Disagreement does not equal disintegration. We also have to remember that joining the United States would not magically erase economic pressures. The U.S. has its own debt debates, political polarization, and fiscal battles. Healthcare costs operate differently. Tax systems operate differently. Currency systems operate differently. Transitioning millions of people from Canadian federal programs into American ones would be one of the most complex governmental shifts in modern North American history. And here's the reality. Investors, businesses, and households value predictability. When constitutional uncertainty rises, capital hesitates. Hiring slows. Lending tightens. We have already seen how sensitive markets can be to rate decisions alone. Imagine layering a sovereignty crisis on top of that. The cost would not be theoretical. It would show up in our loan approvals, our retirement funds, and our provincial budgets. That doesn't mean the frustration in Western Canada should be dismissed. It shouldn't. We need honest conversations about equalization, energy policy, industrial competitiveness, and regional representation. We need transparency from Ottawa and accountability from provincial governments. We deserve data, clarity, and straight answers grounded in official announcements, not viral speculation. Because at the end of the day, this is our country, our tax dollars, our jobs, our families' futures. Dramatic headlines can generate clicks, but responsible citizenship requires us to ask, where is the official documentation? Where is the constitutional process? Where is the verified confirmation? Right now, it simply isn't there. We remain one federation. We remain under Canadian law. And we remain responsible for shaping our future through ballots, legislation, and civic engagement, not rumors. I want to hear from you in the comments. How is this affecting your family? And if you value fact-based reporting grounded in verified Canadian data, make sure you subscribe to CA Reporter.